Hello everyone, myself Sudha Rani. Today we are going to discuss Elementary of UDP Sockets. Lecture agenda. Introduction to UDP. UDP means User Datagram Protocol. UDP means User Datagram Protocol. Key characteristics and features of UDP. Key characteristics and features of UDP. Reasons for using UDP in real-time application. UDP is real-time applications. Basic UDP communication model. UDP means communication model. Concept of UDP echo server. Concept of UDP echo server. Functions used in UDP echo server. Next, working flow of UDP echo server. Working flow of UDP echo server. Last datagram problem in UDP. Last datagram problem in UDP. How applications handle last datagrams. Lack of flow control in UDP. Summary of UDP client server example. Summary of UDP client server example. Next, first, introduction to UDP. UDP stands for User Datagram Protocol. UDP stands for User Datagram Protocol. It is transport layer protocol. UDP means UDP is a transport layer protocol used for faster communication, faster than TCP. Fast communication. It is a transport layer protocol used for fast communication. UDP is a connectionless. UDP is a connectionless, meaning no connection is established before data transfer. Established before data transfer. UDP is a connectionless, meaning no connection is established before data transfer. Each message sent using UDP is called a datagram. Message sent using UDP is a datagram, called a datagram. Next, why UDP is used? UDP does not require any connection setup. UDP does not require any connection setup before sending data, so communication starts immediately. And it is faster than TCP. Faster than TCP. UDP is a faster than TCP. It has very low daily delay because there are no acknowledgements. It is very low delay because there are no acknowledgement. Send connection management. UDP is a suitable for real-time application. UDP means real-time application. UDP is a suitable for real-time application where timely delivery is more important than accuracy. Where timely delivery is more important than accuracy. UDP is suitable for real-time application where timely delivery is more important than accuracy. It is commonly used in online games and video streaming application. UDP used in online games and UDP streaming applications. In those applications, speed and continuous data flow are preferred. In this application, speed and continuous data flow are preferred. Next, UDP communication model. UDP communication model. UDP follows a simple request response model. UDP follows a simple request response model. Client send a datagram to the server. Client send a datagram to the server. Server receive the datagram. Server receives the datagram and response. Server receives the datagram and response. Each datagram is independent of others. Each datagram is independent of others. Next, sender side, receiver side. Request and response model, UDP. UDP communication model. Next, what is a UDP echo server? A UDP echo server receive a datagram sent by a client. UDP echo server receive a datagram sent by a client. It sends back the same datagram to the client without any modification. Without any modifications, it sends back the same datagram to the client without any modification. It is mainly used for learning and testing UDP based communication. It is mainly UDP echo server mainly used for learning, testing UDP based communication. It helps understand basic UDP socket functions and message flow clearly. UDP echo server understand basic UDP socket functions and message flow clearly. UDP echo server important functions. Socket function, bind function, received from, send to. Socket function. Socket function means create a UDP socket that is used for sending and received datagrams. Socket function. Create a UDP socket that is used for sending and receiving datagrams. Bind function. Bind function means attach the socket to specific port number. Bind function means specific port when identify చేస్తుంది. Bind attach the socket to specific port number so the server can receive data. Received from. Receive a datagram from the client and also gets the client's IP address and port number. Received function means receive a datagram from the client and also get the client's IP address and port numbers. Send to. Send the received datagram. Sends the received datagram back to the same client. UDP echo server working flow. The server first create a UDP socket using the socket function. The server first create a UDP socket using the socket function. The socket bound to fixed port number. The socket bound to a fixed port number using bind. So client can send data to it. The server wait for incoming datagrams. From client using received from. After receiving the data, the server send the same data back to the client using send to. After receiving the data, the server sends the same data back to the client using send to. Next, UDP server side, client side. The server first create a UDP socket using the socket function. Server socket function. Next, bind function, received from, send to. UDP client side, socket to send to, received from, closed. The server first create a UDP socket use the socket function. Server side socket function, create the socket function. Next, the socket bound a fixed port number used the bind to client can send data to it. Socket send the data to the bind function. Next, UDP client side. The server wait for incoming datagram from the client using received from. After receiving the data, the server send to the same data back to the client using send to. Next, first the server start the create a UDP socket using the socket. First, the server starts the socket. Starts and create a UDP used in the socket. Then the server bind the socket fixed port number using the bind so that the client where the send data. Socket to send data. Next, the client create a own UDP socket use the socket. Client is a own socket. Next, the client create a own UDP socket use the socket. The client send the data server by using send to with the server IP address and port number. The client send to received from the data. Server by using send to in the IP address and port number. The server wait for incoming data receiving message using the received from. Send the data received from. Next, after receiving the data, the server send response back to the client using send to. Response data client using send to. The client received the server reply using the received from. The client received the server reply using received from. Next, finally, both the client and the server close the socket in the close function. Finally, both server side, client side, close function. Finally, both the client and the server close the sockets using close function. Next, Last datagram in UDP. Last datagram in UDP. UDP does not guarantee. UDP does not guarantee that every packet send will reach the destination. That every packet send will reach the destination. Datagram can be lost due to the network connection. Network connection. Router drops or buffer overflow at the receiver. The sender has no way of knowing whether the data has successfully reached the receiver. The sender has no way. The sender has no way of knowing whether the data has successfully reached the receiver side. UDP does not use acknowledgement. UDP does not use acknowledgement or retransmission to recover lost packets. Retransmission to recover lost packets. UDP does not use acknowledgement or retransmission to recover lost packets. Next, handling lost datagrams. Handling lost datagrams. In UDP, lost datagrams are silently discarded without any notification. Without any notification. UDP means UDP lost datagram are silently discarded without any notification. The UDP protocol itself does not recover lost packets. UDP protocol itself does not recover lost packets. Application must implement their own reliability mechanism. Application must implement their own reliability mechanism. Application must implement their own reliability mechanism. Common methods including use the timeouts and retransmitting data. Common methods including use timeouts and retransmitting data. This makes application level error handling. This makes UDP makes application level handling very important when using UDP. This makes application level error handling very important when using UDP. Next, lack of flow control in UDP. Lack of flow control in UDP. UDP has no flow control mechanism. UDP has no flow control mechanism. No flow control mechanism. Sender can send data at any speed. Sender can send data at any speed. Receiver may not be able to process all packets. Process all packets. Receiver may not be able to process all packets. Sender side, sender can send data any speed. Receiver side, receiver may not be able to process all packets. This can lead to packet drops and data loss. This can lead to packet drops and data loss. Next, summary of UDP client server example. Summary of UDP client server example. Server side, client side. Server side. Create socket, bind, receive data, send reply. Server side, create sockets, bind, receive data, send reply. Client, create socket, send data, receive reply. Client side, create socket, send data, receive reply. No connection is established between client and server. No connection is established between client and server. Each datagram is treated independently. Each datagram is treated independently. Each datagram is treated independently. Thanking you.